Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 23rd of September 2021. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So last day of Gitcoin Grants matching round today. Last few hours actually, depending on when you're watching this. So final call there. But what I did want to kind of point out is that we reached over $1 million worth of donations outside of the matching funds for the Gitcoin Grants here. So this is a really, really awesome achievement. I think this is a record, over $1 million. And then obviously you have the $965,000 matching pool as well. So great to see all these grants funded. As I said, final hours, if you haven't got your donations in, be sure to do so. And just wanted to give a very, very big thank you to everyone who donated to the Daily Gwei and to ETHUB's Gitcoin Grant. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next round as well. If you've already donated, the next round's in 3 months. So yeah, Gitcoin Grants round 12 should be even bigger. All right, speaking of grants and grantees, the EF Ecosystem Support Program put out an update on kind of like their latest roundup of projects that they've kind of like given grants to and projects that they kind of, I guess, updates on those projects. So it's a small little update here on IMAP, which is an EVM gas cost estimator, Rock Logic from Styrian, which I think it has got to do with ETH2 here, and that's kind of like the update. So those two projects there. So if you're interested in learning more about those, definitely go check out this blog post. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. All right, so a bunch of layer 2 updates to get through. 1inch is now live on Arbitrum. Really, really cool. 1inch seems to be deploying everywhere, but it's great to see them on Arbitrum, of course, a true layer 2 on Ethereum. So if you're a user of Arbitrum, which I'm sure many of you are by now, you can now use 1inch to aggregate liquidity between, there's Curve, SushiSwap, and Uniswap as the main liquidity pools on there, so I'm guessing it'll be aggregating that for now, but then as more come online, it'll obviously add more to its kind of like suite of solutions there. So that's really cool. And it's funny, I actually like the way 1inch does kind of like their artwork. Every time, I guess they kind of like announce they're going to a new, I guess like L2 or a chain, they have like this little portal with a little animation in it where they're kind of like, oh, we're going to the fields of Arbitrum or whatever. We're going to like Optimism. We're going to here. We're going to there. So it's pretty cool to see that. But yeah, I'm sure many of you have used 1inch before. For those of you who don't know what 1inch is, it's a decentralized exchange aggregator. So it works to find you the best price across all of these kind of like decentralized exchange liquidity pools. You've probably used other solutions as well, like Matcha and Slingshot and things like that. There's a few others out there, like Paraswap, I believe, as well. And MetaMask has their inbuilt swapper as well, which is a decentralized exchange aggregator too. So, but yeah, that as far as I know, Matcha, I don't think Matcha supports L2 just yet. I think Slingshot's on the Polygon POS chain. I don't think it's on any of the L2s yet. Paraswap, I don't think is either, but I'm sure they're all going to be on there. But for now, you can use 1inch to find you the best price on Arbitrum. Speaking of Arbitrum as well, DAI is now live on Arbitrum 1. So the official DAI token bridge is now available. It was posted in the Maker forum that it's now kind of live here. So you can bridge DAI into the Arbitrum kind of 1 network. And I've explained before, I guess, why Maker wanted to do their own kind of like bridge with kind of like as an official DAI bridge, because they want to keep the token amounts homogeneous across all these different layers, right? Like, because you don't want to have like confusion among users about how much DAI actually is on, the L2 versus the L1 and fake DAI being created, all that sorts of stuff. So I think this is that was kind of like the motivation for doing something like this. But this is just one step closer to getting Maker live on Arbitrum. They've already committed to deploying their... It's funny because I don't think Maker is on anywhere else except layer 1 right now. They're not on the Polygon POS chain. They're not on any of the layer 2s. They have committed to Arbitrum. I'm sure they'd probably go on Optimism as well, but the signaling that I've seen from them has been that they want to go onto layer 2s first. So, as I said, Arbitrum and Optimism support probably coming really soon. But I wonder if they will support things like the Polygon POS chain or any other kind of networks. I don't think they're actually going to support most, if not all of the other networks. And obviously, there's kind of like, on the other networks, there's clones of Maker. There's kind of like, I guess, forks of it being developed there. But I from what I've seen, from the signaling that I've seen from Maker, I don't think they're going to be doing it on their own, which is fine. I mean, I'm of the opinion that these teams should really just focus on a handful of these solutions rather than trying to be everywhere. I think that they kind of like, they lose focus doing that. They split the liquidity like really, really badly doing that. And they split their kind of, I guess, dev attention as well, because For example, if you're deployed on like 10 different networks and say something goes wrong on one of those networks, you have to find someone on the team that actually specializes in that network and can essentially kind of like debug that or help that or do that. And it's just, 10, it's lots of overhead for developers, like 10 different networks. And I know that there are some kind of like I guess like apps that have done this, like SushiSwap and things like that. I haven't kind of like paid attention to what their experience has been like, but surely it can't be anything straightforward, like being able to manage all those networks. And a lot of them are EVM compatible today or EVM equivalent. But imagine like deploying to ones that aren't. Imagine deploying to 10 other different networks and 5 of them aren't EVM compatible. 5 of them have their own kind of like language and virtual machine and all that sorts of stuff. The complexity gets ridiculous here. So I'm not saying that these apps shouldn't be on these other chains or whatever, but I think that they need to focus. They really need to pick like a handful of them and be like, hey, this is our scaling kind of like plan here. And that's what Uniswap has done. They're on Optimism and Arbitrum. They're not even on the Polygon POS chain, which I believe they should be, but there's QuickSwap on there that kind of makes up for it. I think a couple of others as well. But yeah, they've just really seemed to focus on like the true layer 2s. And I'm sure they're going to be on Starknet and ZK Sync and kind of like Polygon Hermes is ZK EVM stuff as well. But that's kind of like been my argument around these layer 2s as well, is that a lot of the, I guess, teams on Ethereum layer 1, they're going to focus a lot of their attention on layer 2, but that's not going to mean that these other kind of, I guess, like chains won't have their own apps, won't have forks of the Ethereum apps. They will, and they already do. But it's going to be very interesting to see how developers handle all that overhead, because it definitely complicates things for them. But I do think it's just going to be a power law in the layer 2 space anyway, where there's going to a handful of winners and then kind of like a long tail there. And there's going to be specialized ones too. We already have that with like DYDX being a specialized layer 2, Immutable X, Diversify, all these sorts of things where they aren't, they aren't generalized. But then, looking even more forward, you can be like, with the bridges, you can basically obviously jump between them. But even looking beyond that and looking to things like ZK Porter or like just general shared state kind of like solutions, we could get to a point where the state can be shared across all of these kind of like, I guess, I don't know if it works for optimistic rollups, but for ZK rollups, and then you don't have to deal with these sorts of things. But still, it'd be interesting to see what the overhead looks like there. But yeah, that's on the Maker front and the Arbitrum front. Something that I missed yesterday was that this cross-chain, I guess, like protocol called Synapse Protocol announced that they now support Arbitrum. And I think this is like the best bridge into Arbitrum right now because they have the deepest liquidity. So I think you could bridge in like 100 or 200 ETH and the slippage was, I think it was 200 ETH and the slippage was like 2 or 3 ETH or something like that. Now that may seem like a lot, but that's actually substantially better than any of the other bridges that I've seen at this point in time. So, they've done some really great job gathering the liquidity here, it seems. But yeah, this just allows you to move ETH to and from Arbitrum within minutes. Now I know Hot Protocol is adding support for this. I think it's going to come today. I haven't seen it come yet, but I think it's going to come today. And I'm sure like Connect and the other bridges are all working on this as well, but Synapse came first. So if you're looking to bridge ETH in and out of Arbitrum really, really quickly without having to wait, obviously, that 7-day withdrawal period, then Synapse is here, and Synapse will allow you to do that, which I think is cool. And I've been saying this for months, and it's just amazing to see this kind of like on mainnet where people were going on about, optimistic rollups, kind of like the biggest drawback is the withdrawal delay. No one's going to use it because of that. It's going to be really annoying for people. And it's like, well, no, we have these bridges out. And obviously the bridges out aren't as trustless. And pretty much all of them, I think at this point, are centralized still. They're not as trustless. Something could go wrong. They're less secure, things like that. But you get kind of like, I guess, the trade-off you're taking is that you get like a withdrawal within minutes instead of 7 days. Now, if you don't care about when your funds hit your Ethereum Layer 1 wallet, you can wait those 7 days and just go through the official Arbitrum bridge, which is fine. And going into Arbitrum through the official bridge is pretty smooth as well. It doesn't take very long. So I tend to use the official bridge. I haven't withdrawn anything from Arbitrum yet. Honestly, the funds that I have in there are probably just going to stay in there. I don't really see any reason to withdraw them. Arbitrum is going to keep growing and they're going to keep adding more and more apps on there. So I think that the withdrawal stuff was just like totally overblown in the past, and now it just seems silly because we've got these options like Synapse Protocol live, and as I said, Hop's are going to go live with their ETH support for Arbitrum today, which is going to be really, really cool. Speaking of the POS chain, or the Polygon POS chain before, there's another all-time high number of users on the POS chain. So 17.16% week over week increase in daily active users, which makes it over 200,000 daily active users on the POS chain, 207,719 to be exact. This is quite cool because, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned that a few days ago on the Refuel, where I said that Polygon's massive kind of like incentive program is kind of like, I guess it's not over. I think there are still some incentives, but most of the incentives have kind of like dried up. And now the Polygon POS chain is basically in this steady state of, I guess, growth in terms of growing for fundamental reasons, instead of just people coming to farm the incentives and then go back to Ethereum or something like that, which a lot of the chains are doing right now, which I think is obviously the most long-term sustainable way to do this. But I'm wondering where these users are coming from. And I actually asked Mihailo, I'm like, hey man, like, where are these users coming from? I'd love to know if they're coming from like the centralized exchanges directly into Polygon's POS chain, because that will give us a good idea of what it's going to look like for the rest of the ecosystem. Because if a lot of them are coming from the centralized exchanges, well, then that validates the thesis that all we need to get major adoption of these kind of like other platforms like Arbitrum and Optimism is native centralized exchange integration, which would be really, really cool to validate. So I'll get back to you guys if I get the data on that. It probably is kind of hard to tell, but it's kind of hard to tell the difference between people just withdrawing to their own wallet, like their Matic tokens or whatever, or people withdrawing to their POS chain to actually do stuff on there. But I'm sure that data can be extracted. So yeah, really cool to see it keep growing. The funny thing is that the kind of like layer 2s like Arbitrum. Oh, okay. Well, I should just say Arbitrum because it's the only one that has like a non-whitelist deployment for contracts. So they don't have no native token incentives, right? There's no Arbitrum 1 token or Arbitrum token or whatever. Yet. Maybe there will be in the future, but not now. And they still had billions of dollars flowing into their protocol. Now, I know people will say, well, there's incentives from the apps on there. That's totally fine. Like, that's going to happen. That's more than fine, and that's actually how you get liquidity. I have nothing wrong with these incentives, but it's great to see that the hunger for layer 2 is there, even without the native token incentives. And I think that Polygon has played it really well they had the incentives, and now they've kind of petered off there, and they have this steady kind of like growth where they're not relying on paying out these massive amounts of rewards just to keep people on the platform. It's just awesome to see. So congrats, I guess, to Polygon on this. As I've mentioned plenty of times, and I'm an advisor to Polygon. Take what you may think I'm being biased here, but I think, as I said, this is just a great like set of data to see kind of like user behavior and see what it's like when you're not subsidizing the growth. Because subsidizing the growth is fine in the beginning, but you have to turn off the incentives at some point, or at least lower them enough so that they're not kind of like you're not paying out too much money, and it just becomes really, really parasitic to the network at the end of the day. All right, so the Synthetics grants DAO have updated the Teleportr app, which has been given a nice facelift here. So what the Teleportr app actually allows users to do is deposit from Ethereum Layer 1 into Optimism Layer 2 much cheaper than the official Optimism bridge. They do this by, I think, bundling the ETH together to kind of like a pool, and then depositing that pool all at once and sharing the fee across all the people that participated in it. I think that's how it works. Maybe if I go to the FAQ, I'll be able to see. I think there's deposit limits on this as well. Yeah, there's a deposit limit. The current limit, it's small, unfortunately. It's 0.05 ETH, and it doesn't charge fees. I think that, yeah, there is kind of like a little bit of a fee here. Obviously, to get onto the layer 2 to pay the gas fees. And then they explain here, Teleportr is a centralized custodial bridge as well. So that's why it can be cheaper. And as I said, the way it works is that it kind of like, as far as I understand it, it bundles this ETH together and then basically teleports it in and spreads the gas cost across anyone. So if you're looking for a cheaper way to get into Optimism, feel free to do so here. Unfortunately, the deposit limit's quite low, still at 0.05 ETH. Or maybe that's not too low. I don't know. What's that off the top of my head? It's like $150, I think, off the top of my head. So it's a bit low, but still, the thing is, if you're a user who's worrying about the, I guess, like fee to deposit into Optimism's layer 2 anyway, I think the fee for ETH is like $10 or something to do it right now. Last at like 50 Gwei. If you're worried about that, then yes, of course. This is going to be beneficial to you, because if you're only depositing in $150 or even less than that, and you have to pay $10 in fees, well, that's eating into a lot of what you're doing. Like, say you've only got $100, that's 10% of your money going to the fee just to deposit into Optimism. So This solution is really great, and I like the kind of like facelift here, the branding around it. Very cool, very retro, very kind of like synth wavy. I think that's what they call it, like neon lights everywhere and stuff like that. So yeah, if you haven't tried this out yet, definitely do so. So Pods Finance is out with an update today about they've introduced their smart collateral product, which allows users to use interest-bearing tokens as collateral from Aave while interacting with the protocol. Now, they describe the main benefits here, where liquidity providers can collect rewards from 4 different sources. They collect them from AMM returns, AMM fees, Aave yield, and liquidity mining incentives from Aave and Polygon. Now, I'm pretty sure Pods is only live on Polygon right now. It's not live on Ethereum Layer 1. So if you want to kind of interact with it, you can do so on the POS chain. But it's not just the LPs that collect rewards from different sources. It's also option sellers, which will collect rewards from 3 different sources, which is the premium received from options sold, the Aave yield, and liquidity mining incentives from Aave and Polygon. So if you're in the interest of stacking this yield, getting yourself a nice, tasty yield burger, well, this is probably another option for you. And as I said, it's not on Ethereum Layer 1. It is on the Polygon POS chain, and you'll get plenty of rewards for kind of like interacting with this. But definitely read this blog post for more details about it. It'll be linked in the YouTube description below. All right, an update out of Yearn here today. They've introduced a new labs section on beta.yearn.finance, and they're describing this as where the black magic happens. So there's a bunch of new vaults here, I think. The vaults that are live in the labs section are not the usual Yearn vaults. Yearn vaults were created with the idea of being up only, and that users could withdraw at any time, and users have asked for different types of vaults and strategies, so Yearn has listened. In labs, experimentation is the norm, not the exception. Different is what we do. Read what each vault does and read well. So essentially, these are just kind of like riskier, I guess, vaults here in the lab that people can kind of like get exposure to. It's not going to be, your easy kind of like lazy yield up-only stuff. It's going to be riskier, and you're going to be able to do different things on here. So they say here, these are not risks for ants. So this is like an emerging section, an experimental section. So if you're into all that, if you're into, I guess, like yield chasing, yield farming, all that sort of stuff, and you don't mind taking on extra risk, this is definitely something to pay more attention to from Yearn. And you know what? I'm really glad to see Yearn keep doing stuff like this. I think, it's funny because like I've been thinking about Ethereum DeFi a lot lately and how it's kind of been, I guess, neglected a bit. I think, it had like a very, very big year from June 2020 to, it had a big DeFi summer from like June 2020 to the end of 2020-ish. And we had a crash in between them, but DeFi was still very hot. And then throughout this year, it's kind of like fumbled a bit here and there. I think, for reasons like scaling, and I think the fact that DeFi ended up basically getting ahead of itself in terms of what it could do. And now we're kind of like migrating to layer 2. We're getting more people using these apps again because like new users were obviously priced out of Ethereum layer 1, so they couldn't use these apps. And most of them are moving to layer 2 now, and they will be able to use them. But it's not just that as well. It's on the product side. A lot of them had token incentives in place, and once they dried up, a lot of these apps, lost kind of like TVL. They lost usage and stuff like that. But there are still a bunch of the quote-unquote blue chips that are hanging around and keep building and keep kind of like doing things that are adding value. But as I said, I think a lot of new users are priced out because of the gas fees. So until these apps kind of get to layer 2 and kind of settle on one like Arbitrum or Optimism, for example, it's going to kind of be like that. And I was speaking about the Polygon POS chain before. They've opened the world of DeFi up to a lot of different users as well. DeFi is alive and well on the POS chain, growing, as I said before. And I believe it's going to keep growing on places like Arbitrum and Optimism as well. Unfortunately, it's just we're in a transition period right now, but it doesn't mean that these DeFi apps have stopped building, have stopped deploying new products, have stopped growing. They definitely are growing, just at a slower pace because it just takes, I guess, like a more of a whale user to want to interact with Ethereum Layer 1 DeFi. Plus, some of these apps are taking longer to get to Layer 2 because they rely on other ones. So, for example, Alchemix relies on a few different kind of like, they have dependencies like Curve, for example, which is on Arbitrum. So I'm sure Alchemix is probably looking at that. They did signal that they wanted to be on L2s as part of like their V2 rollout. So we'll have to see what happens there. But DeFi is so interconnected that you definitely have to I guess kind of like think about where you want to deploy and don't spread yourselves too thin. As I was saying before, spreading an app too thinly, especially one that has a lot of dependencies, is detrimental. And until we get these solutions online, like I've spoken about before, like the Starkware DAMM, the I guess like what is it, the Nova Rari Capital Nova product, which basically allows you to relay arbitrary messages to layer 1, which allows you to basically tap into L1 liquidity from L2. Until those things are live, we'll probably see a kind of like a slower rollout here. But DeFi was always going to be a marathon and not a sprint. I think people really underestimate how much of an impact the rewards played and how much of a role they played within the growth of DeFi. And once they dried up, once people were priced out, DeFi just came back down again, which is totally fine because that gives the builders more time to focus, more time to essentially kind of like build out their new products and get them to mainnet, get them to layer 2s as well, without having all the noise of like people in their Discord being like, when Binance, when token, when this, when that, sort of thing, right? For any of you who have been in Discord when that happens, it's not pretty for the team, that's for sure. So yeah, I guess kudos to Yearn for continuing to kind of like experiment here. All right, so Zapper Season 2 is now live, so you can basically go there and start earning new points. I think they call them vaults now instead of EXP, and these vaults can be used to essentially purchase new NFTs, and there's like a crafting system as well, where you can basically craft a bunch of NFTs into other ones and create like rarer NFTs. So yeah, if you're into all that, if you're into the gamification of this sort of stuff, definitely go check it out. I mean, I definitely am. I'm not as into it as to kind of like I guess cheat the system. I've seen a few people doing that already, where they'll have multiple wallets and they'll just kind of like do the quests on all their different wallets, and then they'll kind of like get all the NFTs and craft rarer ones for themselves and kind of, I guess, cheat the system a little bit there. That's unfortunate, but I mean, it's really, really hard to do Sybil resistance on a blockchain, especially without kind of like things like KYC. Someone made a joke in the Discord channel today that Ethereum's high gas fees are a Sybil resistant mechanism. And I mean, technically, yes, but the thing is, you can do these quests on Polygon, and I think even like BSC, whatever other kind of chains Zapper supports, I'm pretty sure you can do them on there, and just like the fees are obviously negligible on those chains. So that doesn't really stop this kind of like issue of cheating the system. But regardless of that, it's still really cool. I think the Season 2 goes for about 100 days, so I'm planning to get all the NFTs myself. I'm not going to cheat or anything. I'm just going to do it from my Sassel.eth wallet, get all the NFTs fair and square, or at least get all the ones that I can fair and square, and keep just leveling up through the kind of like quest system here. All right, so Lamboshi put out another great tweet about ETH2 client diversity today, where he basically, in his tweet, he said, if improving the stability of the beacon chain is not a good enough reason for you to switch from Prism to either Teku or Nimbus, you also need to consider that due to the design of the beacon chain, you will be subject to severe financial penalties if Prism ever has an issue. Now, I discussed this a bit in yesterday's refuel about how client diversity on ETH2 is critically important. It's even more important than what it is on ETH1. But what Lamboshi is essentially saying here is that if you are running Prism right now, you are part of, I guess, like 64%, I think, of the network. And if something happens with a Prism client, if for some reason there's a major bug that causes you to be slashed or causes you to lose a lot of ETH due to that bug or whatever in the client, no one's bailing you out. And if the network decides that, this is a malicious thing that's happening with Prism because it was of some sort of bug, you're going to lose your ETH, and the network isn't going to bail you out. The Ethereum's not going to bail you out. No one's going to return your ETH to you. So you definitely do want to be on the kind of like other clients. And it's not just Prism this could happen to. It could happen to any client, but Prism is the one that's the majority here. And I was doing some more reading earlier today about this, and essentially, if more than 2/3 of the network is for example, like Prism, and Prism forks off the chain, and then due to a bug, and then finalizes on the fork chain, well, you can't reverse that because of the fact that it's been finalized, and you have all that capital at stake now, and that essentially becomes the canonical chain, which means the other clients need to somehow get in sync with the chain that Prism forked off with, and that's just like a total mess. It's really, really bad, and those other clients may end up getting punished for I guess like the error that was kind of like present in the Prism client or any kind of majority client here. So right now we're not at that point where Prism doesn't currently have 2/3, but they're still too close. I think 64% they're at, and 2/3 is 66%. We don't want that like that. So As I mentioned yesterday, definitely if you're running Prism, please switch to another client if you're able to do so. If you feel comfortable doing so, it's better for the network health. It's better for your own health as a validator, and it'll save you any kind of like troubles down the line. And I know I said Lighthouse yesterday is a good client to switch to. They're all good clients to switch to, but in terms of priority, Teku or Nimbus, I think, should go first rather than Lighthouse because they're even a smaller percentage of the network. So you always want to be on the minority client. And as I've said, like they're all amazing clients. They're all pretty much equal in terms of like functionality and security and all that sorts of stuff. The kind of like major differences, I mean, not the major differences, but the reason why we have different clients is because of what I just outlined. It's not because we want people to compete with each other or whatever. It's because for Ethereum proof of stake to work at its best, and for the beacon chain to work at its best, we need diversity of clients. So yeah, just another call out there. An interesting tweet from Lamboshi as well today. All right, so I came across this tweet today from 2016 from Alex Vandersand. So this is July 24th, 2016, where he shared an image of the origin of the Ethereum logo from the penultimate to the last one. They held a community contest to decide this. I had never seen this before. Look at this from left to right. This is really, really cool. I had never seen this before, and it's just awesome to see it all come together. I've always loved the Ethereum logo. I think it is so unique. It is so well, it fits so well into so much different kind of like art that I've seen out there before, and it is so easily kind of like embedded into different kind of, I guess, expressions of within art and with kind of like on different websites and kind of like designs for different things. It's a really cool logo, so I really love it, and I just never knew it came from this. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of point this out for those of you listening to the podcast. If you want to see this, it'll be linked in the YouTube description, of course. But yeah, really, really cool to see that. And I mean, that's 5 years ago now. This tweet is from like over 5 years ago. It's funny how like how long some of these people have been around for. I mean, Alex Vandersand, for those of you who don't know, is an OG. He's been around since like the dawn of Ethereum. He's been doing a bunch of different things, kind of like throughout the years. And he's at Balancer now. I'm pretty sure he worked at the Ethereum Foundation in the early days, then on Uni Login, and now at Balancer. At Balancer Labs. Not sure what he does there, but yeah, as I said, he's the OG's OG. And look at this little meme from this person here. I've seen this meme plenty of times where someone's like opening up a wallet and it's empty and it looks like the ETH logo. Come on, that's just. I mean, I can't help but laugh at the end of the day. And this guy's an ally. He's got .eth in his name. He loves Ethereum. He just doesn't love the gas fees. I mean, that's fair enough at the end of the day. But anyway, I think I'm going to leave it at that for today, everyone. So thank you again for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.